4 hours and 12 minutes past midnight. Near the Dzhankoy rail junction in northern Crimea, a 6,000-ton fuel transport is rolling across the flat, dark landscape at exactly 50 miles per hour. 62 tank cars, each filled to the brim with high-octane aviation fuel, are destined for the air bases that keep the southern front operational. On the bridge of the locomotive, the Russian crew is relaxed, sipping tea and monitoring the rhythmic vibration of the steel rails. Above them, the sky is guarded by a layered network of S-400 and Pantsir-S-1 batteries, their radar dishes sweeping the horizon with a cold, mechanical confidence. To the Russian commanders, this train is moving through an invisible fortress, a corridor of electronic safety that no drone or missile should be able to penetrate. They have run this route 47 times in the last 2 months without a single incident. This sequence of success has created a dangerous vacuum of complacency, where the noise of the engine drowns out the reality of a changing battlefield. They believe their air defenses are a solid wall of protection, but they are about to learn that every wall has a crack, and sometimes that crack is only a few inches wide. Before we continue, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Exactly 180 seconds from now, that 6,000-ton pride of Russian logistics will be transformed into a 2,000-foot pillar of fire. The plan to destroy it did not begin in a laboratory or a high-tech munitions factory, but on a digital map in a basement in Mykolaiv. Ukrainian planners were not looking for a way to blow up a train. They were looking for a way to solve a high-speed geometry problem. A moving target at 50 miles per hour is a nightmare for traditional drone operators, as a delay of just 1 second in communication means a miss of over 70 feet. The mission required a level of precision that ignored the standard rules of engagement. They didn't need a stealth bomber or $1 million cruise missile. They needed 12 plywood drones, each costing less than a used sedan, and a team of pilots who understood the physics of momentum better than the Russians understood the limits of their own radar. The hook was already set, and the Russian crew on that train was unknowingly pulling the line tighter with every mile they traveled toward the interception point. The drones, designated as the Morok-series, were intentionally designed to look like junk to a sophisticated radar system. Built from carbon fiber and high-density foam, they possessed a radar cross-section no larger than a common seagull. They were not equipped with expensive anti-jamming hardware or complex satellite uplinks. Instead, they relied on a tactic as old as warfare itself: terrain masking. As the swarm crossed the front lines, the 12 units dropped to an altitude of just 15 feet, hugging the contours of a shallow limestone valley that cut through the Crimean steppe. By staying below the hills, the drones stayed below the radar's line of sight. To an S-400 operator sitting 10 miles away, the horizon looked perfectly clear. This was the first fast win for the Ukrainian team. By using the Earth as a shield, they bypassed a billion-dollar sensor network without firing a single shot. The threat was already inside the inner perimeter, and the Russian defense was still looking at the clouds, waiting for a ghost that would never appear. Radar systems are magnificent at catching fast-moving jets at 30,000 feet, but they are surprisingly bad at seeing a slow-moving piece of foam at 15 feet. This is due to a fundamental software limitation called ground clutter filtering. To prevent a radar screen from being filled with thousands of false returns from trees, buildings, and moving cars, the system is programmed to ignore anything moving below a certain speed and altitude. The Morok drones were flying at exactly 95 miles per hour, right on the edge of the filter's threshold. They were effectively mimicking the background noise of the world. In the Russian command center, a junior radar technician saw a flicker on his screen, a faint, ambiguous pulse that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He hesitated. To report a false alarm meant a reprimand for wasting the commander's time. To ignore it meant trusting the machine. He chose to wait for a second confirmation. That 10-second window of human hesitation was the second major victory for the operation. The gap was open, and the drones were through. The Russian electronic warfare complex known as the Krasukha 4 began its invisible scream across the electromagnetic spectrum at 4:22 a.m. sharp. This system is designed to blanket a 60-mile radius in white noise, severing the umbilical cord between a drone and its pilot. For most unmanned systems, this is a death sentence, causing them to either hover aimlessly until they run out of fuel or fall into a flat spin. But the Ukrainian engineers had anticipated this brute force jamming and equipped each Morok unit with a secondary inertial navigation system. This technology uses internal gyroscopes and accelerometers to calculate position based on the last known coordinates before the signal was lost. While the Russian operators saw their jamming meters hitting 100% and assumed the sky was being swept clean, the 12 drones were silently executing a pre-programmed flight path without needing a single byte of external data. This was the third fast win, the transition from human control to autonomous persistence. The drones were no longer being steered. They were being launched like high-speed arrows toward a target that was still 50 miles per hour and exactly 4 miles away. Navigational drift is the silent enemy of any inertial system, and by the time the swarm reached the final 3-mile approach, the accumulated error was nearly 50 feet. To the Russian defense, this was the moment of peak spoofing, where they projected fake global positioning signals to trick the drones into thinking they were flying 10 miles off course. However, the onboard algorithms were designed to detect these physically impossible data patterns, such as a sudden jump in altitude or a velocity that exceeded the engine's capacity. Instead of following the fake signal, the drones switched to their final targeting mode: thermal imaging. The 6,000-ton fuel train was not just a piece of metal, it was a massive heat signature. The 62 tank cars, friction from the wheels against the rails, and the roaring diesel engines of the locomotive stood out against the freezing Crimean ground like a flare in a dark room. The pilots regained a visual feed through a hardened burst-link frequency that pulsed for only milliseconds at a time to avoid detection. They didn't need a steady video stream. They only needed to see the heat of the target once every 5 seconds to adjust their terminal trajectory. A critical strategic decision point arrived as the train entered a stretch of track surrounded by open fields, far from any residential areas. The Ukrainian command team had two choices: wait for the train to stop at the Dzhankoy station where it would be a sitting duck, or strike it now while it was moving at 50 miles per hour. A stationary strike is easier, but a moving strike creates a kinetic catastrophe. If the locomotive is disabled at high speed, the following 62 cars of aviation fuel do not just stop. They telescope into one another, multiplying the structural failure of the tanks and ensuring a total loss of the cargo. The order was given to engage the moving target. This increased the difficulty of the mission by tenfold, requiring the drones to calculate a lead pursuit intercept. Communication latency, the split-second delay between the drone seeing the train and the pilot sending a command, meant they had to aim for where the train would be in 3 seconds, not where it was now. This turned the mission into a real-time physics problem, where gravity, wind, and momentum were the only variables that mattered. The Russian Pantsir-S-1 point defense system, mounted on a nearby ridge, finally woke up as the drones crested the last hill. This system is a mechanical marvel, capable of firing 5,000 rounds per minute from its twin 30mm cannons. However, the Pantsir was designed to kill cruise missiles and high-flying jets, and its mechanical elevation limits meant it struggled to depress its guns low enough to hit targets skimming the ground. As the drones swarmed in from multiple angles, the Pantsir's automated turret began to track the nearest contact. The Russian gunner opened fire, but the high rate of fire caused a localized overheating in the cooling jackets after only 4 seconds of continuous engagement. The system went into a temporary safety shutdown to prevent the barrels from warping. In that 4-second window, 2 drones were shredded by shrapnel, but the remaining 10 used the distraction to split into 3 separate attack vectors. This was the 5th fast win. The defenders had overreacted, and their own safety protocols had momentarily blinded them. The corridor to the 6,000-ton prize was now completely unguarded. The 10th Morok drone struck the lead locomotive's secondary air intake at 4:26 a.m., exactly 42 miles per hour. The 66-pound-shaped charge did not just explode. It funneled a 3,000-degree plasma jet through the engine block, severing the fuel lines and instantly seizing the massive pistons. The 6,000-ton train did not stop immediately, but the sudden loss of powered traction sent a violent kinetic shudder through the remaining 61 tank cars. In the cab, the Russian engineers had less than 3 seconds to react before the following drone slammed into the coupling between the second and third cars. This was a deliberate structural strike designed to break the train's spine while it was still maintaining its 50-mile-per-hour momentum. As the coupling shattered, the hydraulic brake lines severed, triggering an emergency lockup across the entire length of the transport. This is the moment where physics takes over and technology becomes irrelevant. The sudden deceleration caused the rear cars to override the front, a process known as telescoping, where the sheer weight of the aviation fuel acted as a hammer, crushing the steel tanks into one another like soda cans. The resulting breach of the first 5 tank cars released nearly 80,000 gallons of high-octane fuel into the air in a pressurized mist. When the third and fourth drones impacted the center of this cloud, the ignition was not a simple fire but a thermobaric event. A massive orange fireball expanded at 2,000 feet per second, consuming the oxygen in the immediate vicinity and creating a vacuum that pulled the remaining cars toward the center of the inferno. The heat was so intense that the steel rails beneath the train began to lose their structural integrity, softening into a state of plastic deformation. This ensured that even if the fire could be extinguished, the logistics route itself was physically destroyed. At this stage, the human element of the Russian defense had completely collapsed. Soldiers on the ground were seen abandoning their vehicles and running into the dark fields, fearful of the next secondary explosion. This psychological victory is often overlooked in tactical briefings, but it is the most durable result of a high-precision strike. The illusion of safety had been replaced by a reality of total vulnerability, where the most advanced air defenses in the world could not stop a piece of plywood and foam from erasing a billion-ruble transport. A final damaged drone, which had been clipped by a 30mm shell during the initial breach, remained in the air. Its left stabilizing fin was gone, and its motor was vibrating at a frequency that suggested imminent mechanical failure. In a traditional mission, this unit would be considered a loss, but the Ukrainian pilot utilized the drone's remaining momentum to steer it into the final cluster of fuel cars at the very back of the train. It did not need a perfect engine or a clean signal. It only needed to fall with purpose. As it impacted the 62nd car, the final explosion completed the circuit of destruction. The entire 6,000-ton transport was now a single, continuous line of fire stretching for over half a mile. This final payoff was the ultimate proof of redundancy in the swarm. By the time the sun began to rise over the Crimean steppe, the only thing left of Russia's strategic fuel supply was a scorched scar on the earth and a twisted mess of blackened steel that would take months to clear. The strategic fallout of the Dzhankoy strike reached the Kremlin within the hour, sparking a wave of internal investigations into the failure of the S-400 network. The official report would eventually blame a software glitch, but the reality was far more uncomfortable for the Russian high command. They had been defeated by a combination of low-cost technology and high-level physics. The Ukrainian planners had exploited the very complexity of the Russian systems, using their filters, their safety protocols, and their rigid hierarchies against them. Each layer of the Russian defense had been designed to counter a specific conventional threat. But when faced with an adaptive, multi-vector swarm, the entire architecture became a liability. This asymmetry is the defining characteristic of modern warfare, where the cost to defend a target is now 100 times higher than the cost to destroy it. The 6,000-ton train was gone, but the lesson it left behind was even more damaging. In a world of persistent surveillance and precision drones, there is no such thing as a secure rear area. As the fire continued to burn, the impact on the air bases in southern Crimea was immediate. Without the high-octane aviation fuel carried by that train, the sortie rate of the Russian fighter regiments dropped by 40% within the first 24 hours. This created a vacuum in the air over the front lines, allowing Ukrainian ground forces to move with a level of freedom they hadn't experienced in weeks. The strike on the train was not just a logistical victory, it was an operational enabler that changed the geometry of the entire theater. The Russian commanders were forced to divert dozens of air defense units from the front lines to protect other rail junctions, further thinning their defenses where they were needed most. Every time a Russian officer looked at a radar screen and saw a faint, flickering signal, he now had to wonder if it was a bird, a car, or the beginning of the next $60 million catastrophe. The psychological weight of that uncertainty is a weapon that never runs out of ammunition. The precision of the timing was perhaps the most impressive aspect of the entire operation. The train was struck exactly 3 minutes after it had passed the last major hardened bunker and 2 minutes before it would have entered the heavily fortified Dzhankoy rail yards. The Ukrainian planners had identified a 5-mile dead zone where the terrain favored the attacker and the defensive response time was at its slowest. This level of predictive intelligence suggests that the planners were not just watching the train. They were simulating the entire Russian response in real time. They knew when the Pantsir barrels would overheat, they knew when the radar operator would hesitate, and they knew exactly how much momentum the train would need to destroy itself upon impact. This was the seventh and final fast win. The realization that the target's own speed and weight were the primary explosives used in its destruction. The drones were merely the catalysts for a self-inflicted disaster that Russia had spent months preparing for without realizing it. In the aftermath, the Dzhankoy rail line remained cold and silent. Satellite imagery showed that the intense heat had warped the ground to such an extent that the entire section of track would need to be excavated and rebuilt from the foundation up. This meant that the primary artery for Russian supplies into northern Crimea was severed for the foreseeable future. The drones had not just destroyed a train, they had redesigned the map of the region's logistics. The cost of the 12 drones used in the attack totaled less than $50,000, while the combined value of the fuel, the locomotives, the rail cars, and the infrastructure damage exceeded $85 million. This ratio of destruction is what makes the drone swarm the most significant threat to conventional military power in the 21st century. It bypasses the economy of scale that large militaries rely on, allowing a smaller, more agile force to inflict strategic-level damage for the price of a few dozen consumer electronics. The final payload of the mission was not delivered by a drone, but by the footage captured during the strike. The high-definition thermal video of the 6,000-ton train exploding at 50 miles per hour was leaked to social media within hours, bypassing the Russian state media's attempt to downplay the incident. This visual proof served as a potent counter-narrative to the claims of impenetrable air defenses, eroding the confidence of the Russian public and the morale of the logistics troops. When the soldiers who operate these trains see their counterparts transformed into a fireball in a matter of seconds, the willingness to take risks evaporates. The operation was a complete success, demonstrating that no matter how much armor or electronic protection you wrap around a target, the laws of physics and the ingenuity of a determined attacker will always find a way through. The 6,000-ton train was gone in 3 minutes, but the echoes of its destruction would be heard across the entire front for the rest of the war.